Ah, this Groaty takes me back, Arthur. Do you remember? Every bloody bonfire night, Mum would have it simmering on the stove, sometimes for days. Sit there, a couple of scruffy little urchins, bowl of grits, watching the embers shoot up into the black sky like fireflies. Dad'd be off with his lots, drinking, gambling, always was. He'd come back stumbling, roast some chestnuts on the fire, tell us a tale or two, and for a moment, Arthur, the outside world didn't exist. Good old days, eh? Before it all changed, when the Great War came. I'm off to bed, Arthur.
Imagine you had a time machine and you could visit any point in history. Where would you go? What would you do? And more importantly, to me anyway, what am I going to eat? Today we're going to explore early 1900s Birmingham because I'm curious as to what the common person from that period might have eaten. The real Peaky Blinders would have eaten this dish, and you never know, perhaps Laurence Olivier, who spends a lot of time at Birmingham Rep, would have eaten this also. This is an absolute belter one-pot dish, traditionally eaten on bonfire night, Groaty Pudding. This week on Cooking Through Time. I was looking through this book that was kindly lent to me by Professor Billy Spakeman from the Black Country, and I saw this dish called Groaty Pudding, and I thought, you know what, I actually remember some of the old folks talking about this back in the day. Gritty, they used to call it. Everybody over the age of 50's heard of it, especially in Birmingham, the Black Country. Nobody really eats it anymore, but maybe it's the name, maybe it's something to do with the oats, I don't know. But I think it's definitely something that can make a comeback. In my opinion, it's nearly up there with beef bourguignon. You got slow cooked shin of beef with vegetables. I had to research what they are, but basically it's the whole oat kernel that's been kiln dried. They make oats out of them by steaming the groat, removing the outer husk, and then rolling them. These things have the highest nutrition value of any cereal, so I can see why this dish was important. Even though it contains meat, it would have been a poor man's meal, a working class meal, because it contains shin of beef, which back then was a cheap cut of meat. In the days of the coal mines, the spalk heaps left behind were a source of fuel for the poor families. During tough times, like strikes and economic downturns, it wasn't unusual to see men, women and children foraging these mounds for pieces of coal. Old prams and handcarts, often called dobbins, were used to haul collected coal, which was known as bats. And just before bonfire night on November the 5th, local children would gather the bats to build the base of their bonfires, which could burn for days. Families would gather around, sharing basins of Groaty pudding and baked potatoes, which were roasted in the embers of the fire until the skin was black. So, ingredients. As usual, all the measurements are going to be in the description, but we've got shin of beef. We've got leeks, onion, the lovely groats, 3 bay leaves, and water. Right, let's cook.
On a high heat, melt some beef fat in a pan, throw in the diced shin, cook for as long as it takes to caramelise each piece all the way around. Add the onions, leeks, the groats, water and bay leaves. You want to scrape off all that lovely caramelisedness that's stuck to the bottom. Finally, add a large pinch of salt.
Now we're going to whack it in the oven, 150 degrees, no less than 3 hours. You want that meat just falling off the bone. Right, that's time to have a little beer now. If you're a fan of Peaky Blinders, you'll know that everybody liked to drink back then. And going to the pub was one of the very few things that working class people could do as entertainment, really. However, bonfire night would have been an event that kept a lot of people away from the pub. Who wouldn't want home-cooked food in front of a massive fire with your friends and family? The kids would have had something like sarsaparilla, which is a non-alcoholic beverage made from the sarsaparilla root. A bit like ginger, really. Quite often sold by street vendors. And for the adults, men would have had a tankard of something strong in their breast pocket. But today, I'm going to choose a beer that's brewed near Birmingham, Wolverhampton. Stout was popular as well, but this is called a bitter. Banks's bitter. It would have been widely popular in pubs. Beer wouldn't really have been consumed at home like today because you couldn't buy it from the supermarkets. They didn't exist. If you really wanted a beer, you'd have to use the off-licence window of a pub. So you'll notice a lot of British pubs that have an off-licence window that nobody uses anymore, like a hatch. Anyway, cheers. You know, I'm so glad I resisted the temptation to add stock or stout or wine to this dish. And I know why the recipe called for just water, because it's so rich and creamy. And at first I couldn't work out why, but now I know that it's the groats oat. Basically, when you make your porridge, even without the milk, oats release a starch and a beta gluten that gets released into the liquid, and it's a natural thickener, and that's why groats work so well in this dish. I really do feel like I'm tasting the past. You know, I'm ashamed to say that as a Midlander, a food and history fan as well, this is the first time I've cooked a dish from my own region, and I'm so glad I did, because although it does need some tweaking for the modern palate, I think it could make a comeback. As I mentioned, the groats are the most nutritious of all cereals, full of fibre, so very good for you and filling, but it won't give you that carb coma. Beef just falling apart like that. You know, as a cook, it's tempting to add things like beef stock and maybe some pink pickles to cut through, maybe cook it with stout, but I want it to be true to the recipe, and it tastes really good. So, thanks for watching this week's episode of Cooking Through Time. I just need to ask you one teensy favour, just click subscribe and like, and that's going to help push this new channel to a wider audience, which means I can keep on cooking these forgotten historical feasts, which will only get better over time. And if you have any suggestions, then please leave a comment, send me a message, and I'll do my best to reply to them all. Oh, next week we're taking our time machine to ancient Rome, so hopefully see you there on Cooking Through Time.